Hi, my name's Paul Pigat. I am a multi-instrumentalist that primarily plays in a band called Cousin Harley, and you are listening to Talking Blues.
So you recently came back from Hornby Island.
I was on Hornby with a bunch of Canada's great blues musicians.
Jack de Kaiser was one, I think.
Jack de Kaiser, David Gogo, Emily Burgess, Morgan Davis.
Wow.
Angel and Dee who live on Hornby Island that are fantastic musicians from Quebec. And I'm sure there's a few other. Oh, of course, my drummer Jesse Cahill was on the gig as well, and Jack Lavin from Powder Blues.
Oh, nice. So,
Yeah.
tell me, I've heard about this musical camp, if that's the right term for it, maybe a musical getaway. But tell me what it is and what you get out of that.
Well, it's a camp that's been going for about 24 years now. I have participated. I think this was my 14th time teaching at this camp, and for me. Well, of course, it's a great opportunity. I've been an educator since I was a kid. I was, I went to School of the Arts and I taught at the School of the Arts, and I went to university and I taught there while I was studying. And I love teaching when I have, students that are very interested. And this is a great opportunity because these people are there for a very specific reason. They want to enjoy a week of music with some of Canada's finest blues musicians and learn. So, the first time I did it, I thought, wow, this is the most wonderful place ever, because I'd been to Hornby Island before, and I truly think it is the jewel of the West Coast.
Wow.
And it's grueling. It's a grueling schedule. I'll tell you that. It's not an easy one. You start teaching at 9:30 in the morning, which is not easy for most musicians, and you do about 6 hours of teaching every day, and then you perform every night.
And are you teaching a classroom or is it one-on-one? Or I don't even know how many people actually go to the island.
So it's I think there's about nine. They allow 90 people. It always sells out, and you're usually teaching to a classroom of about 10 to 12 people. And you have a major class, which happens every morning on the same subject matter. And then in the afternoons, you have minor classes, and you can sort of jump around and do whatever you want with those, and do something maybe a little more interesting, or a little bit more eclectic. Like I always do something on Scotty Moore, or this year we did a class on Cousin Harley, which I thought, my drummer's on the gig, so why not just do it? Why not just kill two birds with one stone, get our classes together, and we'll just show how you play with someone after 20 years, how the kind of connection you have after that long. So,
Wow.
but yeah, it's every spring. I think they've only they canceled two for COVID. No, they canceled one. They canceled 2000. No, they canceled two. 2020, 2021, they canceled. But it's every spring, and it's it's usually May is the gateway into the festival season. And this is the perfect way to set up a festival season. Like it's everything is calm and cool, and you're there amongst people that just want to have a great time and learn something. And you're surrounded by all this beauty. The food is always fantastic. The people who run it have been, there's a lot of original members that have been running it since the very beginning, and it's awesome. I'm trying to get Kevin in it.
Yeah.
I want to get Kevin in it because Kevin would love it.
So tell me what you get out of it. You said you've been teaching all your life, but what does something like this do for you?
Oh, well, it's, for me, well, first of all, it's a wonderful getaway. That's first and foremost. But, I've on the business side of things, I of course am performing, and I'm, selling my products, and I've got return students that I've gotten out of this gig. But really, I think for me, I'm a very urban person. But when I hit Hornby Island, I'm no longer an urban person. I truly change. Like I just go, oh yeah, I could totally do this. This is totally could be my way of living. But then when I think about it, maybe a week's is just enough. But that's really it. And every once in a while you'll get a student that's just like there's this young kid Farley who I've been teaching and you just meet someone that's really special. Farley is, he's a little different than everybody. He's a little bit on the spectrum, and Farley has such a unique way of looking at music, and he has no boundaries when it comes to playing. Like last year, he asked me 20 minutes before the student concert, which they do every Thursday night, and he says, "Paul, will you play with me?" And I said, "Of course, I'll always play with you, Farley. What do you want to play?" He says, "Do you know Mediterranean Sundance?" And I said, "Are you asking me with 20 minutes notice to play Paco de Lucia and El D'Amelio?" I said, "Okay, let's do it." And we did it. And then this year, I forget the name of the song, but it was, and I know my Django repertoire pretty good, but it was a Django tune that I was not familiar with, and from his later period, from his, and I said, "Really, that's what you want to play? We're at a blues camp." Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's whatever challenges them. So you get to have that experience with these young musicians that are really, really excited. So it's sort of, after you've been doing it as long as I have, sometimes that's a nice reminder.
I've heard a number of people who teach talk about that aha moment that the students get and how much that means to them because they've been there.
Absolutely. When you see that door crack open in their mind, and they finally figured out that what I've been talking about. Maybe it was for an hour, maybe it's been for a month, maybe it's been for 2 years. But when they get it, then I get all excited because I know, okay, now we can go over to this and we can talk about this, and also, with me, teaching is always a great way to sort of keep your own skill level up, because it's quite easy to forget things and or neglect things in your playing, and when you're looking at a student, you can see what maybe what they need to work on, and then sometimes you go, wait, I haven't worked on that myself in a while. So then it sort of just reinvigorates what you're doing.
So before you go, what kind of preparation work goes into a week at Hornby Island?
Well, yeah, well, for me, I'm different than most, but when I first started with Hornby, it's not quite as crazy as what I used to do. I used to have basically a book. I would transcribe, if I was doing acoustic blues, I would transcribe, Blind Lemon Jefferson, Blind Blake. I'd go crazy, and I just do all these transcriptions, and it's nuts. And like this, trying to teach a group of 10 people that are there for a good time, try and teach them Blind Blake is no fun. So I realized after the first couple of years that I didn't need to prepare quite as much. But I always have, I always sort of think of what I'm going to teach. Like generally with me, I'm one of their main fingerstyle teachers. So, even though these people are blues oriented people, I always try and incorporate a little bit of Merle Travis in there, because that's more my jam, and that's where I'm coming from. That's why they hire me, is because that's what I do. But yeah, it's always that, and some years are a little bit more prepared than others. I remember maybe about 10 years ago, I wrote everything. I did no transcriptions. I just wrote original material, and I taught only original material to the class. Well, this is a ragtime tune. I just wrote a ragtime tune. This one is a country blues song. Here's a country blues song I wrote, or here's a bunch of Western swing or jump blues lines that I wrote. Then other times it's because I've done so many of them. It's it's always a challenge to come up with something new and interesting. But then there is a lot of turnover with the audience, with your student load. So if I was less into work, I would just regurgitate some lessons, but I never do. And then I get mentally I'm psyched up because the hang is always fantastic, because you're hanging with, well, like we named all the people that were there this year, but you're hanging with great musicians that you haven't seen in ages, and I know a lot of the people that go to the camp. I've become friends with them over the last 20 years. So you're psyched up and getting all excited, gonna go see those people, have fun, and do crazy stuff.
I don't know if I read this correctly. Was your first instrument a stand-up bass?
Yes,
It was.
it was.
Okay. So, but you started playing guitar at the age of 11.
At 11. So I started playing stand up. I guess I was 10 when I started playing stand up. And I lived in Toronto. I lived in Downsview, sort of Jane Shepherd area.
Right.
But I wasn't very close to my school. So, I just remember I was really into the stand-up bass. I really thought it was cool.
Okay, so
Um,
tell me, there's debate as to whether you came from a musical family or not. I
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
but
Don't tell my mother. Don't tell my mother.
I know your mom says you came from a very musical family. But tell me about how you that initial attraction to the stand up bass, and I presume you must have been a tall kid at age
I was a
10.
pretty big kid. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I was. Yeah, I was pretty much my full height by the time I was 13 or something. Um, but it was grade whatever it was, grade 6 or 7 that you go in, you get either band or you get orchestra. And before that, you know, there was no music. And I walked into orchestra class because I was chosen for the orchestra,
Well,
and
wait
I
a
thought,
sec.
well,
Sorry, wasn't there Nana Muscuri and Zamfir?
all right, with this, yes, the pain. Well, the band. If I ever have to listen to the Lonely Shepherd, then I might have to I might give it all up, man. I might, and not to say it's not
No,
amazing,
no.
not, and I wish I could name off some of Nana Muscuri's material, but I can't. Unfortunately,
But
that's been
no other
I purged
music.
that.
That so
Yeah.
you walk in cold. You're not really sure much about band or orchestra.
No, like I was, of course, I listened to the radio as a kid, and when I was, we had family up in Northern Ontario, and there was a fair amount of Charlie Pride going on in that family. So I had a subtle appreciation, but there was no, not like I was coming home and music was playing or something like that. Um, so I thought, well, what's the only instrument in this orchestra that you could play rock and roll on? and I thought, well, Sting plays upright bass. Although I don't think I actually not looking back, I don't think I had ever even noticed that Sting. Sting was still an electric bass player at that point.
Right.
But I thought, well, there's a bass, and there's bass in music that I listen to, so I took up the bass, and we first parent teacher meeting. My teacher at the time said, Paul is obviously very interested in music. So because I literally had zero interest in anything else, like nothing else.
But did you
Uh,
just become obsessed with the bass or music once you started playing?
well, I was really into it, but no, like I'll tell you why I stopped playing bass because that's when I switched over to guitar, and that's when it kicked in. I remember they said that I could take my instrument home. And I said, yeah, I totally want to take my bass home. And I'm 10 or 11. I don't know how old I am. And I'm carrying this bass, and I got to walk about a kilometer to get to the bus stop. And then I get to the bus stop and I try and jam this thing. And I'm 10, right? And I'm trying to jam this bass on the bus. And I said, forget that, man. I'm not playing this thing anymore.
Good choice.
Yeah. Although I continued to play it for many years, as a side thing. But yeah, I said this is not what I want to do. I don't want to be hauling around something that's quite this large. And it was also my brother, because I really wanted to be a drummer because I thought drummers were cool. And he said, "Are you crazy? Look at it." My brother said, "Are you crazy? Look at all the stuff you got to carry." And then, about 3 or 4 years later, when I was about 16, playing in the downtown Toronto area, I used to, like, as I mentioned, I lived up at Jane and Shepherd. So I would take the Jane bus from, to the Jane Street station. Then and I had a house gig at the Black Bull at the time. And then I would take the subway across the Bloor line. Then I would get on the University line and I would go down to Queen Street. And then I would catch the streetcar, all carrying a Telecaster, a bag of pedals, and a Fender Super Reverb. So I'm not sure that that's any easier than carrying a drum kit on a bus. It's about the same amount of weight. So it really didn't matter in the how heavy it was. It was just as long as I could pick it up. That was, I think, the most important thing.
So your first connection with music was rock and roll or
Yeah,
rock music.
rock music.
And this is what you wanted to pursue with your guitar.
Yes, I was very much a rock, like as a kid, because it was the 80s, right? It was the early 80s. So like 82, 83, 81, 82. So, AC/DC, Sabbath, Zeppelin, I was of that ilk, so that's where I wanted to go, very guitar driven music. So that's, once I discovered that I could get a guitar, because, there was no guitar in my house. And I finally got a guitar, and I thought, oh well, this is how you do it. And then yeah, it was the rock music that really got me interested.
So I know that ACDC, because when I read your interviews, ACDC comes up a lot, like
Oh,
surprisingly
it's awesome!
amount.
It's awesome music.
And I
Bon
loved what you
Scott.
said about it being the music that you first connected to and you still connect to.
I still love ACDC. You can't. Yeah. How can you not love ACDC?
True.
Oh, it always astounds me when someone says, "Oh, I don't like ACDC." Well, you might not like one or two of their songs, but you gotta love a band that has figured out the formula for their project, and they just keep doing it. And there's of course there's the Bon Scott, Brian Johnson camps. I'm I like both. I like both. Um, I love that it's blues driven. It's blues driven rock and roll, and I love. And most people don't. I don't. I think most people don't understand how important Malcolm Young was to that band. Just those simple, simple chord progressions that are just so effective. And all right, the subject matter at times can be a little, you know, whatever. I think there's a few tunes from their catalog that you just can't play anymore. But also the beauty of this simplistic idea, and that it's actually formatted very well. It's really smartly formatted rock and roll.
That's for sure. So at 11, you pick up the guitar. Does the guitar come easy to you? Does this playing rock music become a simple thing?
No, no. I, if anything, I am a very stubborn person, and I was not one of those people that just picked up a guitar and instantly figured it out. No, I spent a lot of time. I was a pretty solitary kid. I didn't have a lot of friends, and I wasn't. I was very, very painfully shy, which is incredible that I am like now, because I'll say anything on a microphone now. I don't care. But as a kid, I was just mortified to be around people. So I spent a lot of time at home, a lot of time just plunking away, and playing Tony Iommi riffs and stuff like that, and I worked hard, and that's why I decided to continue with going to school for it, because I just wanted to be good at this, and it wasn't something that came easy right off the bat.
Was there a moment where you figured out something and you thought, I got to do this. This is what I want to be doing.
Hmm, an actual moment. Well, I think the first time I probably jumped on stage.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you were
that was a
doing that.
very.
What age was that?
I'd be probably about 13. 13. So I was playing in a little band, and a group of people. Let's not call it. It eventually turned into a band. Um, and our drummer, his dad was a solo entertainer, and there used to be a place at Keel and Dufferin called no Keel and Dufferin and Wilson. It was called the Diplomat Tavern, and he invited us all to come out and play. And I said, "Oh, this is." I was excited, and we got up, and it was terrible, and it was wonderful. It sounded terrible. It felt wonderful, and I loved it. I loved the whole idea, like, cause especially for me being so completely introverted, that I was like I could be in front of people, but I was hiding behind my guitar. Um, and then within a year, we were playing the Diplomat Tavern at 13, or 14 years old. We were already playing that bar. Like the 80s were an interesting time in Toronto, because I don't think liquor laws really existed for underage children, because I seem to have gotten into all of them. I never had a problem getting into a bar and playing. So,
Do you remember what you
you know,
played in that first gig? Can you remember any songs that you played?
no, maybe, and I don't know, maybe Hollywood Nights
Wow.
by Bob Seger. Maybe Hollywood Nights. Yeah, that'd be about the right time period for that.
Okay, so I find it so interesting that because this is not that unusual that a performer is very shy.
Mm.
And I don't know what it is about that music that allows them to come out of their shell. But describe that for me. As a really shy kid, getting on stage would seem very frightening to me. But it obviously wasn't for you.
No, and I think the reason it wasn't was because of the people I was playing with. We were very like as I said, I didn't have many friends, but the friends I did have were really they were. I felt deeply like these. I had a big connection with these people, so I felt safe there because I was with my buddies, and back then the crowds were because we were but just kids, we were just little children, and the crowds were really you know very supportive. So you're scared at first, but then once you hit the first chord and everybody goes yeah, and then, and you go all right, this doesn't suck, but performing solo was now I'm very comfortable. In fact, I'm even more comfortable performing solo than I am with the band. But the first, when I was in university and doing adjudications and stuff like that, that's stressful, and that was hard for me to do.
Okay, so this is like one of the questions that I had is, so you
Mm.
start off listening to AC/DC and Black Sabbath. You're in a rock band making lots of noise. At one point or another, you decide I'm going to go to U of T and go for classical guitar and composition.
Mhm.
How does that happen?
Okay, well, I guess by about grade 11, I was obviously this was something that I thought I was going to do. Regardless if I'm good at it or not, this is what I'm going to do
And do you
because
know
I
what this is? Like, what is it that this thing was that you were going to do?
it's somehow music based. I wasn't sure what it was going to be. I wasn't sure if I was, I'm still not sure if I'm good enough to be a performer. Um, but I really loved the puzzle of music. So I started going to the Royal Conservatory. So I went to the Royal Conservatory and studied there in grade 11. And then for promptly told by not one of my music teachers, but one of the other music teachers that, because I wanted to go to Claude Watson's School of the Arts. I said that, I wanted to really check that out. And they said, oh no, you'll never get in. And so I suffered another year of grade 12 in my school. And I said, forget it. I'm going to audition for Claude Watson's School of the Arts. And I got in there. No problem. That was actually, I was surprised at how easy it was for me to get into that.
So you're
And
pretty
there
good by this time.
I'm all right. I can play pretty well. I could sight read a little bit, but I could improvise a little bit, but I really didn't know what I was doing. I was purely playing by feel and ear by this point.
And
Um,
sorry to interrupt, but how
yeah,
much, what's your appreciation of classical music at this point?
it was the 80s. There's so much shred guitar that was classically oriented, right?
Oh,
You
that's
got Richie
true.
Blackmore, you've got Yngwie Malmsteen, you've got what was there was that great band from Japan. I can't remember. Long hair, really, 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 that kind of stuff, right? So I thought, oh, this sounds like classical music to me. So when I went to the School of the Arts, I got exposed to things that I never been exposed to. I got exposed to jazz music. I was really interested in that. I thought, wow, this is something I've never experienced before. And then I had some great, more contemporary minded teachers there that were into 20th century music. And that's when I heard 20th century classical music, that's when I really got excited. I thought, this is great. Um, because I think Stravinsky is the beginning of heavy metal. And I think Debussy is the beginning of jazz. So that really got me interested, and by that point, I knew that if I was going to do this, I better figure out how this stuff worked.
But are you so? What are you thinking by going to U of T and RCM and doing classical music?
Mm.
What do you see your future in music to be?
I really wanted to be a composer. I really wanted to. I wanted to, and I think the reason I wanted to be a composer wasn't necessarily to compose music. I just wanted to understand how it worked. I wanted to know how people put sounds together to make things that I heard. Um, I still to this day am searching for the magic key in figuring out how Stravinsky put together his harmonic structures. But that was really the driving force, was not necessarily because I had a goal. I had never had a goal. I still don't have a goal. When I grow up, I might become, I don't know, a bus driver. I'm not sure. That's how much goal I've had in my life. Other than I am completely infatuated with the guitar, and I just want to figure out how music works.
And so by
It's
this
a
time,
puzzle.
you don't. really care what genre you're playing. It's music.
No,
It's guitar.
it's music. Yeah, I was playing while I was going to university. I was playing in blues bands around Toronto. I was playing in sort of so what I guess now would be called Americana or alt country bands, but it was when Blue Rodeo was playing around Toronto. At the same, I was in bands that had that similar kind of vibe. Um, yeah, I would take any gig. The weirdest gig I ever took was when I'm going to jump forward just a couple of years, just because this is the craziest gig I've ever done. Well, maybe not. No, I've done way crazier gigs than this, but this was the first crazy gig. I'm classically trained. I have a degree at this point, and I had no gigs. I had nothing. There was nothing going on, and I'm looking through Now magazine, and it said yodeler, willing to play with anyone. going, this guy's desperate, and I'm gonna play with him. And that was one of the strangest things I know. Especially when I showed up and he was Italian and he sounded just like Wolf Carter. It was like, that's insane. And I loved it. I thought this is the craziest stuff ever, and I'm going to do it.
So, what did that classical training and that background that you acquired from U of T give you? What did it do for you as a musician?
I don't think it gave me the understanding of music I was looking for. I know all the theory behind it, but I didn't know how to put it into practice. What it did do is it gave me a friendship with Ellie Kastner, and Ellie was my mentor, and Ellie gave me confidence that I could that he threw me in situations that I thought, why are you throwing me in this situation of all people? Because I was not his best student, but I was one of his most open-minded students. Um, like he would bring guitar players from Cuba to come and play to perform at the university, and they would stay at his house, and I would teach at his house, and he would say, Paul, you must come downstairs and play some blues with these kids. I don't know any Cuban music, Ellie. That's okay. They don't know how to play the blues either. We're just going to get them. And that was really important. Like my time with Ellie and Ann Kastner were very, very important years. Um, Ellie taught me how to really think about music and how to practice properly and how to feel music. Like while other teachers were telling me to do things that were on the page, Ellie wouldn't care what we like. He would, if something was really wrong, like notes are notes, but expression, you know, um, and how to do like I'm completely uneducated in my first year of university when it comes to really looking at the finer details to a score. And Ellie would say, Paul, your rubato is beautiful. And I said, why is it beautiful? It says by the you start and you slow down and you speed up and you slow down and speed up, but at the end, it's exactly where it's supposed to be. And I didn't know that. And if I had done that with another teacher, they would have said, no, this is where you slow down here, and then oh no, this is in time, and then you're going to speed up to catch up to the meter of the piece. And Ellie was just more organic, and he sort of opened up a door for me. It was a big door, you know.
So, you start with rock, then you go through this classical music phase of composition and playing. Then you kind of go into swing jazz,
Swing jazz, yeah,
country.
yeah. Country. Well, there's also another because of this sort of rootsy Americana stuff that we were doing in the early. Well, I guess that would be the late '80s, early '90s. Of course, the Stray Cats are out, and I've always loved West Coast swing, West Coast jump blues. That's always been my thing. I'm not a Chicago guy. I'm a West Coast jump guy. So, you know, with rockabilly, there's a lot of rockabilly in there as well. So that's also in the mainstream at the time.
Right.
And there were some great bands around Toronto at the time. There was the Razorbacks, and of course they were a little late for the Bobcats, but the Tin Eddies were a band that I went to go see many times, and I really loved that sound. But then, so I classical music, then into jazz swing. So jazz swing. Um, I was definitely because I had been teaching at Ellie's Place for all through my university career. So I had taught there for 4 years, and I taught there for another year after. I finished university, and there was a guitar player who also taught there named Rob Campbell, who I believe still plays around Toronto. And I used to love listening to him practice, because I knew nothing about jazz. I was just, I could hear him play and go, this is just the most beautiful stuff ever. And I was always leaning towards doing like guitar transcriptions of Debussy because I love that sound, that sort of dominant ninth sounds and big major seventh sounds. And then when I moved out west in '94, and I'd always been the kid that had the gigs because I was the young kid, right? And I wasn't quite the young kid anymore. I was 24, still young, still relatively young, but I couldn't get any work. I could not get any work, no matter what I tried. So I just decided, all right, well, I guess I'm going to become a singer because if I want to do this, I'm going to have to be a singer. And I said, well, who do I like to listen to sing? Well, I said, I really like Tony Bennett. And I really like Billie Holiday. I love Ella Fitzgerald. So I just started singing that stuff. And then, I had a gig working at a music store in Sydney by the Sea. It was the most depressing little music store because nobody would ever come in. Like literally, if I saw two customers in a day, I thought, oh my God, it's a rush. Whew, I'm exhausted. I sold 2 packs of strings or something. So I had all this time on my hands. And there was an old Gibson archtop there, and I had a little copy of the pocket reel book. And I just decided I was going to learn every Ellington tune in the pocket reel book. And that's how it all started with the jazz swing thing.
So, is it driven more by the need to sing?
Well, originally, I think the reason I started my band was because, well, started the Smoking Jackets, which is my first real band that I fronted, was because I just needed to make a living, and I was interested in this music. But prior to that, like the whole learning of the jazz, my version of jazz, because I'm not jazz trained, I've got my own way of thinking about it, is because I just needed to unlock it. I had to figure out the puzzle. If I can't figure out the puzzle, it drives me crazy. So I had to go, well, why do these, all right, why does that go there? And then why, and then go, okay, that I've seen that before, but that's a variation of it. And then all of a sudden, all the years of university and all the theory training that I learned, of course, they're focusing on very atonal things back then. I think university music is not nearly as atonal as it was when I was there. But then all of a sudden, all these wonderful theories that you go, okay, well, this is how Bach did this. And you go, this is exactly the same thing, but this is Ellington doing it in his own way. And then everything started to come together. That's what I think that's when all the education I got from university finally clicked in, was when I started playing jazz. And I go, right, now I get it. So maybe I should have just studied jazz, honestly.
Okay, so what about the singing? Like, how easy was that?
Oh, it was terrifying. Now that's terrifying because I'm not hiding behind my guitar anymore. That was terrifying. It was not easy, so this is, so I just moved to Victoria. And it's the jam scene. So I would go out to the jams and I'd be a sort of floating guitar player. And then I learned how to say, okay, well, I got to start singing, whether I like it or not. And I was terrified. I hated singing. I was not comfortable with my voice at all. But I learned a couple of songs, and I started singing them at the jams. And then someone came up to me and said, "Listen, our singer can't make the gig next week, so can you front our band?" I said, "Yeah," because I was hungry, man. Like literally, I was hungry. Like I was pretty poor. And I said, "Of course I can." And I had 5 songs. so I said, I all week I just crammed my head full of whatever I could. I thought, what's going to be easy for us to play? What's going to be something that I can remember? And I can't remember any of those songs now. So I did it. And at the end of the night, they said, "That was great. Thanks, man." And I said, "Thanks. If you ever need me to come back, let me know." He says, "Well, it just so happens that our singer's not going to be here next week either." So I said, "Great, I'll be back." Then I learned a few more tunes. And then at the end
Sorry,
of the night,
what kind of music is this now?
oh, this is all over the board. This was like, I did some Stray Cats. I did some blues tunes. I probably did some country stuff because, you're just radio stuff that I'd heard over the years. It's probably some Johnny Cash in there. Who knows? Um, so I finished the next gig and I said, "Thanks, man. That's great. If you need me to come back again," and they said, "Yeah, yeah, we need you to come back again." So this happened two or three times, and then finally I realized that it was my gig at that point. And Victoria is a wonderful place, especially then in the early '90s. It was a wonderful place um, because there's the Naden military band there, and Victoria is also a place where, of course, a lot of retired people go. So the band had some really great players in it, like some people that were in the military band, Naden band, and there was a lot of fantastic jazz musicians in Victoria at
How
the time.
how
There
big's the
still are.
band?
Oh, it's a quartet.
Okay.
Quartet, drums, bass, guitar, and trumpet. Um, and I just sort of decided, when because they were doing stuff all over, they were doing popular stuff and retro rock and roll and stuff, but they were all jazz musicians. So, and of course, I wasn't. So I want to be a jazz musician. So you know what? I'm changing this. I'm the singer. It's my band now. So I changed it on them, and I made it into the Smoking Jackets, which is a swing band.
Was that your comfort zone as a singer?
Yeah, I felt much better, much better singing, jazz and swing music. I don't know why, because I shouldn't. It's way harder to sing.
Right.
But I didn't have a powerful voice. Like now, I have a big, powerful voice. But then I didn't have a powerful voice. But I had a pretty good soft voice, so I could sing like the ballads and stuff like that. And I loved singing the ballads. So
How long did it take for you to become comfortable with singing?
to become comfortable, fully comfortable, that's so long ago. Um, I'd say a couple of years for me to. No, it was longer. For when I finally thought, okay, it's like I forget that I read some interview or read some article on Jimi Hendrix, and he heard himself on tape, and he said, "I can actually sing." Um, I didn't have that realization for a very long time. It wasn't until Cousin Harley, really, Cousin Harley. Then I knew I could sing because even though when Cousin Harley started, it was we played a lot of covers, but I would never play them the same way that the original artist did them. So I would make them my own. I'd make new feels for them. I'd make new arrangements for them. I put them in my own keys, and then I thought, okay, now I think I can sing. Now I think I can sing.
And what's your guitar playing like at this point?
Pretty, I listen back every once in a while. I'll listen back because there are some recordings from back then. The guitar playing is actually pretty advanced for where I was conceptually. Like I still was figuring things out, and but it's chromatic and very much harmonic oriented. So I think by that point I had already established where I was going. As a guitar player.
And was it difficult to get that band a following?
No, the Smoking Jackets. No, it was easy because Victoria was a small town. A lovely town, but a small town. Um, and and it's also a tourist town. So, and I was playing with some of the best musicians in the city, so we instantly got a following. It was a local following. We didn't travel. We were just strictly local. But no, it was quite quick that we got a regular crowd of people, and yeah, yeah. It should have been harder. I obviously didn't work at it.
But so how did you? Okay, so how did you become this guitar player that people know in the States and all over? Like, how does that? Is that because of Cousin Harley or?
Yeah, well, partially. Well, actually, it probably comes from a person I know on Vancouver Island was going to start because he knew I was an educator, right? I've always been a teacher, so he started a video company, a video lesson DVD company, and he asked me if I would do one. So I did three for him. I did Rockabilly 101. I did Introduction to Fingerstyle, Hillbilly Fingerstyle, and I did Jazz and Up Your Guitar. Um, and because at the time there was nothing else, like there was no True Fire. Homespun was not interested in anything that wasn't blues. There was There was Arlen Roth's company that he was doing sort of more well-known guitarists and their personal styles, but just on straight instruction of what is rockabilly, what is Merle Travis style playing. Um, so I did these 3 DVDs, and they sold like hotcakes. Um, and that's how so many people got to know me, was through these DVDs.
Do you get the Gretsch deal because of that?
Kind of, yeah. So I did, uh, but not because they knew who I was. They didn't know who I was. Um, a student of mine who came to me because of the DVDs. Um, Ended up deciding, he was very tech savvy, meaning that he owned a computer. Because at that point, I was completely not tech savvy, and I'm still not tech savvy. It took me 10 minutes to log into this. So, um, but he decided that he was going to, help me promote. So he made a little website for me, which I never had before, and he was an avid fan of Gretsch guitars. So, he started posting my clips for my DVDs on the Gretsch pages, which at the time was the main Gretsch forum on the internet.
And you're playing Gretsch at this point.
At this point, I'm not playing
Oh, you're
Gretsch.
not. Okay.
I'm only playing Gibsons. I'm only playing Gibsons at this point. So I get booked to play at Viva Las Vegas, which is the big Las Vegas rockabilly festival. It's still going. It's still probably the biggest rockabilly event in the world every year. So I got booked to play the gig. And a whole bunch of people had contacted me from the Gretsch pages, and they said, we really want to meet you at your show. Can you meet us? And I said, yeah, where's a good place? I said, well, Gretsch is putting up a booth. And they said, why don't you meet us at the Gretsch booth? And I went to the Gretsch booth, and I met all these guys that had my DVDs, and I signed them all for them. They were really nice cats, and I still keep in touch with a lot of them. And there was a guy there by the name of Joe Carducci. And Joe Carducci was basically the A&R guy for Gretsch at the time. And they had a booth up, and they had a bunch of guitars, and they had the new line of amplifiers. And just, I was about to go and do my sets, and Joe came out and says, hey, you want to play our guitars? And I had a beautiful 1965 ES 125 TDC with me. That was my baby. But I looked on stage, and I hated all the amps they had on that stage. I said, I don't like any of these amps. But the Gretsch had just made this line of amplifiers that was made by Victoria. So I said, I'll make you a deal. I'll play your guitar if I can use your amp.
But how do you know what that
So,
amp is going to sound like?
Well, I'm all tube, 15 watts, single 15, tremolo and reverb. It's going to sound good. It's pretty hard to not sound good at that point. It's like it's kind of got all the things. But you're right. It was a Hail Mary. But I kind of knew between a bunch of twin reverbs and that amp, I was going to go with that amp, because for me to get a twin reverb to sound the way I wanted to, it would be mind-blowingly loud. So I said I wanted a low wattage amp. So I knew that these were low wattage amps. I said, I'll play the guitars if I can use the amps. And I loved it. It was great. I played my show, and it's loud. There's lots of wheedlies all over the place. It's like a sausage fest over by my side of the stage, because it's all dudes, my side. Over my bass player side, all girls. I get the dudes. That's just the way it is. And at the end of the show, Joe walks up to the front of the stage and says, "What's your address?" And I gave him my address. He says, "Okay, this whole rig is going to be sent to your house tomorrow morning." So he sent me the guitar and the amplifier, and then he says, "I want to have a meeting with you tomorrow." And then we set a meeting, and then I was the clinician for Gretsch for, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I still am. I'm not sure. Well, because everybody that I knew from that time period is all retired. So I think I'm still a Gretsch artist, but I don't know if I'm the clinician anymore.
So Gretsch has a certain reputation with rockabilly, does it not?
It does, which is really funny, because there was very few guys that played Gretches. Like, let's be honest. There's Eddie Cochran and there's Cliff Gallup. And of course Chet Atkins. But Chet Atkins, you can't really call him rockabilly. But most rockabilly was recorded on Telecasters.
Right. Okay.
Or Les Pauls.
So when you become a Gretsch artist, does that mean that you're not allowed to play a Telecaster?
No. I made it clear that I was going to play whatever I wanted. But I did play my Gretches a lot. they're great instruments. They're incredibly good instruments. In fact, I designed one with Stephen Stern because I like to build guitars. So I designed this guitar with Stephen, and I have the only one of those, and it's really an exceptional instrument. But no, I made it clear that, like, I do a lot of different gigs, like, because I like to do a lot of different stuff, right? I like to play in pop music, I like to play rock and roll, I like to play country, I like to play blues, and I said I use a different guitar for every one of those gigs. So how about, I'll certainly, for important shows, I'll play the Gretches. But if I'm playing a top 40 country gig, I'm not going to sound like Albert Lee on your 63120. It's just not, the instrument just doesn't do it. So,
Okay, so that conjures up a few things.
mhm.
One is the fact that you do so many different gigs. Is that just the way you are? Is that out of necessity? Is that what drives the fact that you play in rock bands, pop bands, country bands, blues bands? Like, why is that? Why does that happen? And also, does that work against you, or does that just keep you busy enough that it doesn't work against you?
I think it probably works against me because no one knows what I'm doing half the time. Um, I don't know. I think the reason I do them is because I'm always interested in learning something new, right? Even though whenever I play these gigs, I still sound like me. It's like I'm not one of those guys that can morph into someone else.
Right.
It's always me playing this kind of music. But no, I just like to do different things, right? I like if I only had one type of music I could that I would be able to play for the rest of my life, I don't think I'd be very happy. I think I'd like to have a wide variety of stuff to do
And that's
at all
always been the
times.
case. When you started Cousin Harley, that wasn't, you weren't focused on that beyond anything
No,
else.
I still had the smoking jackets going on. I was playing in a punk band called the Metronome Cowboys. I probably recorded Nico Case's first record at that time, which was more alt country. I've always, and then I'm always trying to write fingerstyle guitar stuff. So no, I've always got to have a lot of different things going
Okay, and one of those different things which you kind of alluded to was
on.
making guitars. I believe today you were working on one of your guitars.
Oh, I finally got all the epoxy off my hands. Yeah.
So when did that start? Did that start very early, or your love of building guitars? Where did that come from?
I probably built my first. Well, let's say I attempted to build my first guitar when I was probably about 13, and I was a constant tinkerer because I didn't have, I didn't have a lot of money. So my desire for expensive guitars was far greater than my financial means of getting them. So, I would do things to guitars. Like I go, okay, I want, once again, it was the 80s. So, I need a Floyd Rose. All right, I can't afford a guitar with a Floyd Rose. What can I do? All right, well, I'll buy a Floyd Rose, or I'll buy a knockoff of Floyd Rose, but I can't afford to get anybody else to install it. So I'll do it. I'll figure out how to do it. And so I did that. And then I would go, okay, well, I want a Super Strat this time. So, well, I can't afford a Super Strat, but I got this neck and I've got this pickup. And I go, okay, I'll make a body for it. How hard could it be? Because my father had a workshop in the basement. So I started like that. And then I built a few more guitars over the years. But then when I moved out west, I didn't really have the ability to do it because I didn't have a workshop anymore. I built a couple of guitars on my back porch, or I restored one of the first guitars I ever restored was an old Gretsch of all things, um, which is quite ironic. uh, and then I was building, as I say, I was building them on my back porch. I made these crazy instruments that I would just sort of part together. But then about 10 years ago, I ended up meeting the guy who makes my acoustic guitars, Warren Murphy. And I would just hang out with him all the time because we designed guitars. We designed a guitar together for me, an acoustic for me.
So sorry, can you
And
explain that a little bit? Tell me what's entailed in designing a guitar.
in designing, well, it's about, okay, what's the first of all, what are the dimensions of the instrument? So what we did is we took some classic instruments and we modified them. So we took a 19 probably well or mid 30s Gibson L00. And I said, okay, I want an L00 style guitar, but I want it to be deeper. So I want it to be an inch thicker, and I want a long scale on it. And then, so meaning I want a 25.5 inch scale as opposed to a 24 3/4 inch scale.
And are you thinking
And
in terms of sound or the visuals?
sound,
Always the
sound.
sound.
Yeah, because I've always bought and sold guitars since I was a kid. So I've played a lot of guitars. I've owned a ridiculous amount of guitars. I still own a stupid amount of guitars. Um, so I'm quite acquainted to what certain guitars will do and what they will make, what sounds they will make. So, I was thinking I wanted the projection of a Martin, but I wanted the warmth of a Gibson. I wanted the size of that Gibson as well because it's very comfortable to play. And then the radius on the board, what radius I wanted on the fretboard, because I didn't want it too flat because that would feel more like a Martin, and I didn't want it too shallow to feel like a Telecaster, right? I wanted it, sort of right in the middle. So I was very particular about what I wanted. Same thing I did with Gretsch. As I say, after you've played as many guitars I've played, you get to know what you like, which ones, and you go, well, wouldn't it be great if you had that with that? And then you find someone that's crazy enough to build it.
But when you say, okay, I want this, this, and this, do
Yeah.
you have a sense of what that could sound like?
Yeah, I pretty much know where it's coming from. Yeah, like it's always going to be a surprise, especially with acoustic instruments. But we go, okay, long scale. It's going to have a big authoritative bass. Means it'll be bright, so you need to balance that brightness out with maybe a little bit of extra depth in the body, or tone whatever woods you're going to use. Mahogany is going to be nice and warm. The first guitar that we made, I wanted to try something different. This was a Hail Mary, because I could have said, I want it made out of Honduran and mahogany. No problem. He had lots of it. I want to make it out of rosewood. No problem. He had lots of that. I said, what's, and also I didn't want him to use a lot of his expensive woods on our experiment. So I said, what else do you have here that maybe isn't quite so dear to you? And he pulled out this beautiful piece of walnut, and I said, okay, we're going to make it out of walnut, and it turned out wonderfully. Who knew that walnut kind of sounds a lot like rosewood? It's very bright, but with a low depth to it. So that was an experiment. There's always a bit of like, I don't know, maybe it's going to sound good, maybe it's going to suck. Who knows? I'm not building it, so it doesn't matter.
But you are building one right now.
I did I've restored so many guitars over the years, and then I did a series of guitars during the pandemic, which were called Sputniks. And the reason they were called Sputniks, this is of course before the Russia-Ukraine war. I found a guy in Kiev who had a stockpile of Soviet era Russian pickups. And I said, I've tried every pickup. I've played them all, but I've never heard these. So I had to buy them. So I bought a few sets of them, and they were awesome. They were just so weird. And the one I open, the first thing I'm gonna do is take them apart. I got to see what's inside of them. So I take one apart, and it's so overbuilt. It's ridiculous. It's like a Russian tank, right? It's all six little coils, all beautifully wired together in this series. God, man, nobody outside of Soviet era Russia would go to that much trouble to make a pickup. And then I'd open up the other one, which was a slightly different style, and it literally was a rat's nest of wire with a magnet shoved in the middle. And that one sounded even better. So I built the first few I built were based on these pickups. So and I would do these. I would sort of take things that I liked. Like I would find elements of guitars that I like. I'm a big fan of European guitars. I love European guitars, especially from the late '50s and into the '60s. They just had style, incredible style.
So when you say style, are we talking visual or
Visuals, yeah, this is visual style.
okay?
I would take my main design was I would take the bottom part of the guitar, and that was loosely based on a 1908 Washburn acoustic parlor guitar, and then the top of the guitar, like the horns of the guitar, is where I would have my creativity, and I would go, okay, this one's going to be jazz master inspired, but it's going to look like a Yolanda from Eastern Europe. Or I would do another one that was, okay, this is going to be, um, you know, a Les Paul style guitar, but it's going to be inspired by Antonio Poli, who built Wandres out of Italy. And I would just, do whatever I want, and I would make these crazy things. Right, but right now, um, my wife and I bought a piece of property on the Sunshine Coast because, of course, we can't afford anything here in Vancouver. We're renters here, so we bought this piece of property, and it's a lovely place with a wonderful wonderful little house on it, and we spend weekends over there. And there was a plank, there was a chunk of cedar just sitting on the ground that the previous owners had been using as a step. And I said, well, this is my property now. That means that's my wood. I took that piece of wood again. I said, I'm making a guitar out of this piece of wood. So I started cutting, I blocked it out and I trimmed it all up so it was, into a blank. And I realized I had enough for a Telecaster body. That's the amount of good wood that I got out of this piece of wood. So I went to the lumberyard and I found some beautiful figured maple. So you can't just buy a piece; you got to buy the whole board. So I bought the whole board and I measured it out and I go, well, there's 6 necks there, so I guess there's 6 Telecasters. I'm doing 6 Telecasters.
So is this for your own pleasure, or do you sell them?
Well, I sell them. Yeah, I've
Okay.
sold all my prototypes. I've sold. I've done lots of custom orders. But I build them and then we'll see if anybody wants them. I don't care if they sell or not. It'd be really great. It'd be really awesome because I could use the dough. But it's really, I love building them. I really love building
Do you
I
lose
love being able to
yourself?
figure it out. Oh, completely.
So how different is that, losing yourself, than when you're playing music and being involved, or when you're recording? Is it all connected?
I think so. It's the same thing where it's always problem solving with me. I have to solve problems. I love solving problems, and guitar playing is all about solving problems to me. It's all about musical conversations, right? So you've got a question. What's the answer? That's how I see musical phrases, as questions and answers. And I think a lot of people do as well. And then guitar building is like, okay, I got this block of wood. How do I make these 2 blocks of wood go together and not look like a bag of garbage? Right? So once again, because Warren was always laughing at me because I go, no, I'm not doing a bolt on neck because that's too easy. No, I'm not doing it. I'm going to do my first guitar I'm ever going to do. I'm going to do a set neck, but I'm not going to do a symmetrical set neck. I'm going to do an asymmetrical set neck, which is like, that's insane. Why would anybody do that? I did it. You know why? Does it look good? It looks pretty good for a first time. It looks really good. But was that the smart thing to do? No, it wasn't. But then once again, I don't think I'm very smart. So you know, I like a challenge.
Okay, so the other part of it is you're a
Mm,
composer. You write songs. I
I write
I
songs.
don't know if you use any of your classical composition theories in whatever you do today, but you also write songs for different genres. Does that
Mhm.
is that inspired by projects, or recording projects, or is that inspired by whatever comes to you and you say, "Oh yeah, this is a Cousin Harley song. Oh yeah, this is something I want to work with somebody else."
Yeah, it's better. It's better that I. It's funny because I'm in a real writer's block right now, and I have been for the last couple of years. Um, but when they come out, they just come out, and then I decide where they're going to go. And then I can tailor them to whatever project I want to do. Like it's funny on the latest Cousin Harley record. There's one song that I was sure was going to be part of my Boxcar Campfire project. Um, but then I recorded it for Boxcar, and I left it on tape. I never bothered printing it. I wasn't really happy with it. And then I listened, and I thought, well, let's try it with Cousin Harley. And it's a bit of a departure for Cousin Harley, but it kind of works because we have these 3 very unique voices that are in Cousin Harley that everything kind of sounds the way it's supposed to sound when the 3 of us were playing together. So yeah, no, I let the song come out and then I figure out where it's going to go.
Okay, so and you said you're in the midst of a horrible writer's block. Does that worry you? I mean, do you not have a project coming out with Kevin Bright?
Oh, we finished one.
Right, but
Yeah, we did the shut-ins, which is our, although Kevin really wanted me to Kevin's a little bit like Tom Waits, is that you really gotta everything he says you got to take with a grain of salt. Sometimes just no. Don't tell him we did it. We did it remotely. Don't tell him it's don't tell him it's a pandemic project. No, we were in like Bali. We spent a week in Bali and we recorded it in at a gum tree farm or something. But musically, like little instrumental stuff. Like I've never had a problem writing instrumental music. I can usually come up with something interesting, and it's not to like Kevin's stuff is what really inspires me. But there's always like if I did one Cousin Harley record that was all instrumental, and on every Cousin Harley record there's at least one or two instrumentals. I can write that stuff to the cows come home. That's no problem, especially in the hillbilly style. It's lyrics. Lyrics are hard. I've never been a lyricist because I'm a what's the word I'm looking for? I am a there's a specific word. Anyway, it's I am not a willing participant as being a singer, or I wasn't for many years. It's out of although I love singing now, but I wasn't one of those people that had to just express myself all the time. So words are difficult. I find words very hard.
So that's
So
the block that you were.
that's the block. I have lots of little ideas, but to develop those into stories, which is kind of what I like. That's kind of how I write. I write story songs. So to develop them into stories is I find tricky. Although I honestly have not had a lot of time to sit down and put pen to paper lately. So maybe I'll go through all those little one line things and come up with something. Maybe I'll just put them all in a hat.
So, but when you said, "Well, I'm going through this phase right now," does it worry you?
No, it doesn't, because I'm really happy with my guitar playing lately. Which as a guitar player, that ebbs and flows, and I love building guitars. So I'm happy right now. I know that there'll be more songs. There'll be more songs. They're just not. I also think the best songs I've ever written have always been the ones that literally just go, "Blah," and there they are.
I find that
Just
whole
like,
concept so amazing when it just goes through you.
yeah. Well, one of my songs that I do with the Boxcar record, with the Boxcar project, is a song called Heartland, and it was written by my friend Tolan McNeil, who lives on Vancouver Island. And I tell this story at almost every acoustic gig, and we all lived together in this house with Carol and Mark, who is the self-proclaimed queen of Vancouver Island, and just one of the most entertaining and completely off the wall people I've ever met. She's a great singer songwriter, and we all lived in this place. And it was called the Last Resort, and the Last Resort was our house, but it was also had a recording studio in the basement, and it was a flop house for any touring bands that were coming through Victoria at the time. Well, Tolan, still to this day, his main job is he's a roofer, and one day, he's my roommate at the time, and he was coming home from bringing a load of refuse to the Heartland dump, which is but 30 kilometers outside of Victoria, maybe 40 kilometers outside of Victoria. And he came in, and he's covered in grime, and he's just messy, and he's got this crumpled up piece of tissue paper in his hands, and it's got all these words scribbled on it. He says, "I just wrote this on the drive home." And he sat down and played this song, and it is the most beautiful murder ballad. In fact, I quite often tell everybody, I said, this is the perfect murder ballad. If you're into murder ballads, not everybody's into murder ballads, but I like me a good murder ballad every once in a while. But it is the darkest yet most melancholy murder ballad I've ever heard. And he wrote it. It took him 30 kilometers. He wrote it over the drive of 30 kilometers. He literally wrote it down on this tissue paper, sat down, and it was all still in his head, and he played it. That's how fast the really good ones come. I've yet to have one that good. That one's exceptional.
But how do you explain that?
I don't know. It's just the stars align, and the music of the spheres is in your head. I don't know how that works. It's a mystery.
Okay, you said before that you didn't have goals. Do you have goals now?
Um, do I have? I could be really glib and say, well, hopefully not to end up on the streets by the time I'm 70, which is that's a goal. That's a goal as a musician. That's a goal. I don't. I just want to keep making music. That's all I've ever wanted to do. people, other people years ago, you want to be a rock star. I don't want to be a rock star. I just want to be able to pay the rent and and be comfortable and have some respect for my peers and to continually create music. That's all I want to do.
What gives you the greatest satisfaction?
The greatest
Yeah.
satisfaction musically, honestly, playing with my trio. I love it. I truly do love it.
After 20
You know,
years.
I have to say, and I'm on my third. I'm on my third drummer, and I'm on my fourth bass player. Every one of them has been best buds. We're all, that's kind of that's prerequisite to be in my band is we all have to get along. We're never going to argue, and we're always going to have a good time.
You never argue?
Never, never. If we do, I should. Well, they also know it's my band. Yeah. So I made this very clear many years ago in another band. I said, this is not a democracy. This is this is this is a dictatorship. And just consider me to be your Fidel Castro because this is the way it's going to go. Now that doesn't mean I'm not going to listen to you guys,
Right.
but when it comes down to it, there has to be one person driving the bus, and my guys, have always known that, and they've given me great suggestions, and I listen to them. Like I know that Jesse, my drummer, who's been with me for 20 years now, Jesse has a place on Lasqueti Island, and I know he loves it there. So I know he wants to take most of August to be on there. So I just said, you know what? I'm not going to book any gigs in August. Not for Cousin Harley. I'll book other gigs,
Right.
but I'll make sure that he has his time. It's about, I think, if you respect everybody in your band and their priorities, then they'll do the same.
Okay, my final question.
Okay.
Um, with this amazing journey that you've been on, whether it be building guitars or playing rockabilly or going to school for classical composition or classical guitar, how do you summarize that journey of music for you?
How do I summarize it? It's been a very interesting and there's a word lack the opposite of specific. It's been a very chaotic journey because I never knew where I was going to go, but I allowed each new interest to have its moment, right? So if there's anything to summarize the journey is that I've indulged myself on every interest I've had. If like when I got into Kevin, like when the first time I saw Kevin, which was about 20 some odd years ago, I had Cousin Harley going since 98. So I probably saw him in 99 or 2000. And,
Was this with the
and I just
sisters?
yeah, it was when they were playing at the Orbit. And I allowed even though I went, nothing that I'm doing right now, this has nothing to do with what I'm playing right now and how I make my living, but I love it. So I just, I worked on it by myself, and then I had a band that I only played around Vancouver with called the Sign Trio, which was the self-indulgent guitar night. So I could, cause it was a wank fest. Oh, it was such a wank fest, but I would play whatever I wanted.
In what genre?
Oh, whatever I wanted.
Okay.
Like we do, and we mix stuff. Like Kevin and I, he was just here in town, and we did, a version of Radiohead's High and Dry, which was one of the tunes that I did back then. But then I would do Jimmy Bryant at that gig, and then I would do Michael Jackson at that gig, and then I would do Black Sabbath mixed with Thelonious Monk at that gig, and I do whatever the hell I want. That was the whole point. It's completely self-indulgent, right? So it took a little time for that to come, but that was from the inspiration of Kevin. So yeah, whatever indulgence I have eventually will come out. I'll do something with it. So yeah, it's self-indulgent. That's what the journey's been. It's very self-indulgent.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's a real pleasure
Hey,
getting to know you.
Same here, and I'm going to be in Toronto sometime in June if you're around.
Okay. Yeah.
If you feel like coming out, if you're feel like hearing some rockabilly, I think I'm playing the Dakota, and maybe hopefully going to get together with Kevin and hang out.
Oh, good. Okay. I should ask, how did that project with Kevin come about?
Oh, okay. So pandemic, right? Everything's shut down. Everybody doesn't know what to do. And as I've mentioned, I am no good at sitting around doing nothing. So I said, okay, well, I don't know how to use my computer to record, but I have this one. I have all the stuff, but I don't know how to use it. So, there was a lot of people that said, man, over the years that have said, Paul, I really want to record a record with you. People from Ontario, from Quebec, from the States. And I said, great. All right. So I put the feelers out. I said, okay, you know what? You want to record a record with me? Let's record a record. Whatever you want. I don't care what it is. Here's an idea. And I threw out ideas. And, this is great, man. I'll get right back to you. And then, I wait 2 weeks and I forgot. I'm going to get back to you. Well, it's a pandemic. You're not out on tour. Like, what's the problem? Right. Like, it's not that hard. So, you know what? And so I thought, okay, well, let's scrap that idea. Let's scrap that idea with the people that contacted me. Why don't I contact the people I want to record with? And I'd gotten to know Kevin over the years. And I had a great bass player who was living in Palo Alto, California, that I used to work with, and a drummer that I used to work with on Vancouver Island. So I just sent Kevin a note, and I said, you want to do a record? You interested in doing this record? This is the idea. The idea is that we just, if you want to write songs for it, great. If you don't, here's how it's going to work. I'm just going to record a track, and I'll give you a tempo marking, and you're going to do whatever you want on it. So I'm not giving anybody any kind of guidance on what I think this song should sound like. And I said, I have a drummer in Victoria, and I have a bass player in California. And within 12 hours, Kevin got back to me and said, I'm in. And I thought, okay, that's great. I've had other people say they were in before. All right, well, let's see if he's really in. So I sent him a track, and it was like 6 hours later, boom, there's this response. It's like, holy crap, did you even listen to it? Like, how did you have that? How did you? And then I would hear it, and I would go, well, that's just insane. So I got to write another one. And I sent him another one. And 6 hours later, boom, there it is again in my inbox. And he's got his part already done. And it was amazing. And I would send it to the rest. The rhythm section was really interesting because the bass player that I sent it to is Tommy Babbitt, who's a really, really amazing avant-garde jazz upright bass player. And I said, I'm not telling you what you play, whatever you want to play. What he played was completely like country bass lines. And then the drummer, I sent him the track, and I'm thinking, okay, I hear this is, I hear that in my head, and he brings it back as a New Orleans funeral march. And every tune was like that, and I loved it. And but yeah, Kevin was so prolific and so fast. It was so, God, this guy's amazing because, first of all, he's giving it the time.
Yeah.
That was not only, of course, I knew whatever he was going to put down was going to be insanely beautiful, but that he gave it the time. And like, oh, Paul sent me something. Boom, I'm going to do it and send it right down.
And where can we find this project?
It's on Bandcamp. It's called The Shut-Ins 3-Ring Circus.
Okay, I'll definitely check it out. Paul, thank you so much for doing this.
It was really nice meeting you, Mako.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.